Where to begin? Actually, let me read a couple of poems having to do with my children. And this first one, I'm going to take my cue from Don Patterson, and what a delight it is to be here with you, Don, this evening, who read those extraordinary poems about his children. This first one's about my daughter, and it's a poem about a sonogram of the child in the womb there at about 14 or 16 weeks into the process of getting here. I mentioned the little village or town of Spiddal in County Galway. Spiddal, the corruption of the word hospital, a corruption of the word hospital, a poorhouse, a workhouse, the sonogram. Only a few weeks ago, the sonogram of Jean's womb resembled nothing so much as a satellite map of Ireland. Now the image is so well defined, we can make out not only a hand, but a thumb. On the road to Spiddal, a woman hitching a ride. A gladiator in his net, passing judgment on the crowd. So just before our daughter was born, we discovered that she was, in the great technical term, a footling breech. And the minute I heard that word from the authorities, as it were, that phrase from the authorities, I have to confess I felt a little poem coming on. A footling breech, a footling breech. It's just asking for something to be done with it. And I fear that I may have gone a little too speedily into this poem, because by the time we get to the end of the second line, we come upon the word groin. I must say I was very surprised not to have heard it listed earlier on there. Groyne, the perfect pun. So, as I say, I may have gone a little too precipitously into the sea there. So this is Footling, a poem about the birth actually the preamble to the birth of a child who is going to be delivered by caesarean section. Caesarean in Manhattan and even in Princeton, spelled Cesarian. Footling. This I don't believe. Rather than take a header off the groin and into the groundswell, yea, verily, the groundswell of life, she shows instead her utter disregard, part diffidence, but mostly scorn for what lies behind the great sea wall and what knocks away at the great sea cliff. Though she's been in training all spring and summer and swathed herself in fat and saran wrap like an old-time channel swimmer, she's now got cold feet and turned in on herself. The phantom A in Caesarean. The birth. 7 o'clock, the 7th day of the 7th month of the year. No sooner have I got myself up in lime green scrubs, a sterile cap and mask, and taken my place at the head of the table, than the windless women ply their shears and gralloch grub for a footling foot, Then, warming to their task, haul into the inestimable realm of apple blossoms and chanterelles and damsons and eel spears and foxes and the general hubbub of inkies and jennets and kickapoos with their lemnisks or peekaboo quiffs of Russian sable and tallow unctuous vernix, into the realm of the widgeon, the hue or yellow pole, not the zizzen. Dorothy Aoife, Correlates Muldoon. I watch through floods of tears as they give her a quick rub-a-dub and whisk her off to the nursery. Then check their staple guns for staples. Moving on to my son, this little poem about his the time he was born in May, at a time when, oh, that must be Jackson Brown next door, is it? He is here tonight, I think, isn't he? I can't imagine they're having more fun than we are. Anyway, they mostly. So, there's a poem about the birds, the redknots. The redknots, a little bird which, as many of you will know, is given to extraordinarily long hauls, coming up from Chile, right the way up to the North Pole, essentially, and stopping along the way, usually, I think pretty much, well, until over the last couple of years, of course, when the world's systems seem to have been slightly thrown up for a loop, stopping at roughly the same date along Delaware Bay. So there's a poem having to do with that, this kind of central image. Redknots. The day our sun is due is the very day the redknots are meant to touch down on their long haul from Chile to the Arctic Circle, where they'll nest on the tundra within a few feet of where they were hatched. 40 or 50,000 of them are meant to drop in along Delaware Bay. They time their arrival on these shores to coincide with the horseshoe crabs laying their eggs in the sand. Smallish birds to begin with, the redknots have now lost half their weight. Eating the eggs of the horseshoe crabs is what gives them the strength to go on. 40 or 50,000 of them getting up all at once, as if for a rock concert encore. So let me read a couple from this new book. Great pleasure to be able to read from it. Great pleasure to see Jonathan Galassi, the editor of this book, and so many others here this evening. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for everything. This is a poem called A Hummingbird. The wake that I mention here, needless to say, is Finnegan's Wake. You wouldn't have imagined otherwise. It's a poem that's made up of overheard snatches of conversation at a party. And somehow, well, the idea is that one gets a sense from this bric-a-brac, this patchwork of this little creature somewhere at the center of it, a hummingbird. At Nora's, and this is a sonnet. I'd hate you to leave here thinking that Don Patterson was the only one who could, who had a stab at a sonnet. So, a hummingbird. At Nora's first post-divorce Labour Day bash. There's a fluster and a fuss and a fidget in the fuchsia bells. 2 fingers of sour mash, a maraschino cherry. So, the digits still a unit of measurement, while midgets continue to demand a slice of the cake. A vibrator, you know, that kind of widget. Now a ruby-throated hummingbird remakes itself as it rolls on through mid-forest break. I'm guessing she's had a neck lift and lipo. You know, I still can't help but think of the wake as the apogee, you know, of the typo. Like an engine rolling on after a crash, long after whatever it was made a splash. So needless to say, when you've got a good thing going, you've got to stick with it. And this is a second hummingbird. And I believe that, is this the one that's in your, or was it this first one that was in? I didn't really see the program yet. There's a version, an earlier version, and quite possibly a much better version of it in the program, right? Which one is it? Oh, sorry, it's not, forget that. We'll come to that in a minute. A second hummingbird. We'll come to that in a second. Forgive me. Sorry for not paying attention. So this is a second hummingbird. Now, those of you who venture into New Jersey betimes will know that that one of the great industries of New Jersey is the flavor and fragrance industry. There's an aroma alley of some kind there. I believe that's what it's called. And those who are interested in, I understand also, I was saying this somewhere the other day, that there's some tension between the flavor people and the fragrance people. And so that the flavor people will, needless to say, refer to the industry as the flavor and fragrance industry, whereas the fragrance mob are more likely to say fragrance and flavor. But anyway, here it's flavor and fragrance. But anyway, the word roundelay, which I think we've heard this evening already. There's a little bit of a round song. The comparison been drawn, as they must, between the hummingbird and oneself. A second hummingbird. Yet another money man with a finger in the till at flavor and fragrance. My own not standing still, no less a stance than his. The only grounds for his existence now being to make such rounds and roundelays as mine. To touch what I've come to see as the raw nerve in each of us, each doomed to think himself ever so slightly behind some curve. So it was a porcupine after all. And this is a poem that began with an image, actually, something I saw in Times Square, as it happens, at some ungodly hour of the morning. And a porcupine. Simply because she turned her back on me. A porcupine on the Homer Noble farm would unwittingly give me a shot in the arm, bustling off in her ball gown while clutching a quillwork purse. I'm thinking how our need to do ourselves down will often be in inverse proportion to how much we want to be esteemed. I'm thinking of those who, in the same breath, will kiss up to us and kiss us off. I'm thinking of a woman who'd flaunt from her shoulder blade a tattoo. I regret this. I think we need to have something more wholesome after that. I think maybe I will just end with a little sequence of poems from the end of this book. It's called Wayside Shrines, a sequence of poems having to do with those memorials to, that one that you find at the scene of a fatal, I suppose, accident, a motor accident. And this poem began just with a trip through New York State and just seeing one after another of these little sites of remembrance and musing upon them. So I'm going to end with this, and I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here. Thank you so much for coming out or staying in, and thank you very much indeed for having us here, and to Don Patterson for being such a pal and such a great poet along the way. So, Wayside Shrines. Doomed as I was to follow... Sorry? Somebody say something? It's the microphone. Strange. Wayside Shrines. Doomed as I was to follow a big rig laden with pigs, and a wrecker with its intermittent strobe, I was all the more conscious of piles of rock marking the scene of a crash, some with handwritten notes, others a cache of snapshots in a fogged-up globe. Even a makeshift mobile may see off one of Calder's, and the path among the alders pan out like a prom queen's occipital lobe. Yet nothing can confirm one's sense of being prized, like another's being anathematized. Having myself been run out of town, I might easily have gone down on my knees by each white cross or posy in its tin and resigned myself to the fact a cord of dead wood may be stacked between two living trees. Even an acorn tastes bitter to the runt of the litter when it begins to feel the squeeze. Yet those pigs had seemed content in their profound disgruntlement. I might easily have followed the ruck to where a utility truck hit a dry stone bank, that red rag a token of where its load shifted and kicked off the beehive hut episode on which the narrative sank. Even the lily plugging an oil filter with its stem slightly out of kilter has somehow succeeded in pulling rank, yet failed to lend much weight to whatever it means to commemorate. A flower-pumped Pirelli tire that comes across as part pyre, part tomb, must have taken up a dare from a wiper blade that it could wholly fade while hastening to bloom. Even the spit splutter of baby's breath against a sand-ribbed shutter may look for all the world like spume, yet give no sign of the shoal where a prom queen would pit herself against the indefinite. Another plot lines come to rest in a tool chest emblazoned with pro-tough, on which there roost a molten fuse, an ace of spades, and a pair of twos, where somebody's called somebody's bluff. Even a candle holder on top of the offending boulder speaks to a flame being snuffed, yet managing to live while it's completely inoperative. Had I had more than a glimpse of a lake through a break in a plateau, had I not suddenly been forced to break for Apollo wrapped in polythene, I might have been emboldened and gone with the flow. Even a road resists being led to water like a lamb to the slaughter at Isaac's truck and toe. Yet smoke had risen with next to no fuss, calm above the calamities. Now, as gas prices soared, another billboard had held out, injured before it all but implored, 1888, we can help. I caught the yelp from a clothesline of a plaid work shirt. Even a bald-faced bullock may falter as it mounts an altar that's little more than a pile of dirt. Yet a storm window took a stance against what it must discountenance. Whatever had once put us out of skew now threw me for another loop as I took in a sky in which a couple of clouds had failed to catch. They'd never be a match for that high-flying trapeze troop. Even those former self-inflators who now fast on acorn meal and slaters were distorted by the sky hoop, yet ironed themselves out through the prism of early Irish monasticism. These modern monks, whose low self-worth has them leave earth for a few years, know that not only a wreath from a sacred grove, but a styrofoam alcove marks the spot where they went clear. Even the ashes we scatter and the plaques we set up tend to flatter mostly their own engineers. Yet the smashing of a radiator grill may soothe the implacable. I might easily have knelt for this heartfelt lighting of a torch where someone nailed it or himself was nailed, though the spot where we take a wrong turn is rarely marked by either an urn or a tire scorch. Even a dog and pup, mother and daughter, may half tote, half totter their matching luggage from a porch, yet be ingrained with a sense they too readily press the point of their devotedness. Dedicated as I was to getting the jump on the big rig, the fact that a stump might still bleed through a plaid shirt didn't chime with just how little any of this counts, when not even the grain in the grain silo amounts to chicken feed. Even her momentary taking shelter and finding some ease from the helter-skelter offered the prom queen a glimpse of what it is to succeed. Yet the sudden failure of a brake drum extended her lease on Elysium. Thank you.